Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinosky, your host. I've got a great guest today. His name is Michael Goerlich. He is owner and executive VP at Raven Concealment Systems, and he's president at Threshold Strategic Consulting. So we're going to dive into all that. But he's just got this phenomenal background. He's from the Cleveland area, got a bunch of Rust Belt manufacturing know-how, and just lots of different things going on. It's going to be a wide-ranging conversation like I had with him on the phone just a week or two ago. That's what made me invite him to join us. So stay tuned. He's here with us, and we're about to dive in.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
All right. Welcome, Michael. How are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. This is going to be a good discussion. We had a good first meeting on the phone a while back. And I know we're going to have a great conversation today.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, so before we dive into the business end of things, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you worked up to both of your companies you have going on?
Well, it's funny because everything's sort of interconnected, but I'm what I would describe as an accidental manufacturer. I originally was a sales guy. I went to college at Kent State University, flunked out. I managed to do that twice, actually. Flunking out of Kent State twice.
You're an overachiever.
Yeah, it's not exactly known for its academic rigor, and I still managed to mess it up twice. So, but yeah, it was, college was not the place for me at that time in life. And it's funny because I really appreciated the time that I had there for the exposure it gave me to a lot of the music interests that I have and just kind of, your first time out away on your own, away from your home you grew up in is, a very formative thing.
Yep.
But in so many ways, I remember sitting in classes and being completely incapable of connecting what that time in class was going to do for me to something that I was going to do for a profession later on in life. And so when I did flunk out, it was weirdly like, my parents were like, well, you're not moving home, so you better go get a job. And, but it was a good thing for me because it kind of pushed me out into the real world. I worked as a pharmacy technician for a little bit, but ultimately I realized that I wanted to have something that actually was kind of a career. And in the 90s, when you didn't have a college degree, there were not a lot of white collar fields you could get into,
right? But
sales was one of them that you could actually get in. And in particular, I started off in copier sales, which anyone that's ever known that industry knows that is a great place to learn sales skills, but it's also a very high attrition rate in that field. If you've got a pulse and can fog a mirror, they will hand you a box of business cards and send you out of the wild.
Yeah.
But the nice thing that came from that was, one, I felt like a grown-up for once because I had to put a suit and tie on every day and go out and do things. And the other part of it was that the attrition rate of that sales field worked to my benefit after the first year because nobody would invest in you your first year. But once you stuck around for a year and you were hitting your numbers, then they would really invest in training you. And so I got a lot of really, really good sales and marketing training from that industry that, if I look back on it, it was basically the equivalent of an actual college degree that they
or better.
And because it was real life application, it wasn't so broad. But, my first real exposure in that space that touched manufacturing, apart from the fact that I was calling on tons of manufacturers as part of my sales territory and selling office equipment into factories and manufacturing plants and whatnot. But ultimately I ended up working for a dealership that was actually a joint venture with Kyocera, where they had just purchased Mita copiers and were trying to get their arms around what the US market was like. And it was a very interesting experience because we had actual people from Kyocera corporate that were directly involved with us. And so you were getting a lot more of a mainline connection to how the products were made and what the story was behind the technology and what what our marching orders on the street were made a lot more sense because we were connected to the story of like where the products were coming from and what was driving the requirements. And so I did that for 7 years, which is kind of like dog years in that industry. And when I actually started the manufacturing business that I own now, Raven Concealment Systems, that came out of an accident. That was actually, I was always into firearms as a kind of a hobby ever since I'd been in Boy Scouts as a kid. And it was after 9/11, we had, Buddy and I had decided, there's some money to be made selling guns and gear, tactical gear in this post 9/11 world. So we were doing as like a side hustle on the weekends, going to gun shows, setting up, selling gear. And it was right around the time that Ohio had been talking about finally creating a concealed carry permit for the state. And, prior to that, it's funny when I talk to people about the history of the gun industry, but it's only been since the late 90s and early 2000s that concealed carry in the US was really like a widespread thing. It had not really been a factor. And we found, as we were just buying and selling other products, we weren't making anything at the time. And we found that like the holsters for concealed carry were starting to sell in anticipation of the Ohio's concealed carry permit. And we were like, this is starting to outsell the other things that we have historically had as our top performing products. And then one of our customers came to us and said, hey, I bought this kit in the mail that is like a plastic material that I'm going to make some knife sheaths out of. And I asked him, I said, well, if you're going to make a knife sheath, I bought this Glock 34 that, I can't find a holster for anywhere. Could you make a holster for me when you do that? He said, no, I don't want to do holsters. That'll be a pain in the ass. And, he spoke prophetic words, but at the time we did not know how prophetic they would be. Ultimately, that customer became my business partner in Raven Systems. He's actually what we consider the founder. And, the running joke is I have these silky smooth banker's hands, and but I don't make the things. I was the guy to make sure that the things left the building and we got money for them. But
that's important too.
Yeah, it honestly started as just like it was a weekend adventure because I was working in copier sales Monday through Friday, and at some point it kept growing and getting bigger, and we finally were like talking about what the math had to look like for us to quit our day jobs. And me being the sales guy, I don't know, maybe there was something wrong in my brain's wiring, but like I seem to just find myself being less risk averse than other people. And I was like, I'll go full time, and I'll start getting us a back order going, and then we can sell against that. And I left the copier industry, and it was probably 2005 was when we really kind of planted the flag and said, we're going full speed ahead on this thing.
Took the plunge.
Yeah. And it started out ramping okay. It wasn't like mind blowing, but then it's the combination of right place, right time. You can have the greatest product idea. You can have all the processes ironed out. There's still a 40% ratio of that's just dependent on sheer dumb luck. And
right. Yep.
we managed to land right on the right place at the right time. Ohio got its concealed carry permit, and then a lot of other surrounding states were getting their permits. And so you had basically the government created new customer base, right? Like they just out of nowhere, people were like, I should buy a holster to carry my gun concealed. Yep. And so it just started ramping dramatically. And you could almost tell what the legislative process was by 1 week we'd start getting orders from a new state that you'd not really ever seen orders from, and you could just tell they had gotten their permits turned on.
Right.
But we were working out of a basement on the west side of Cleveland. It was fabricated, so the material is Kydex, which is a thermoforming material. That the joke I make is we basically took what's arguably just industrial wall covering, because it just shows up in 4x8 sheets and it's impervious just about every chemical on earth. But you heat that up and it turns into a floppy material, and you either compression form it or vacuum form it over a mold, or in our case, in the early days, we were just molding it right over the live firearms. But that was all done with toaster ovens and mold presses and clamps and stuff that we picked up at Lowe's and Home Depot. And, that was, again, we didn't plan to be a manufacturer. We were just guys that were selling stuff that was our hobby. And it really took off. And then you start finding yourself in the right place at the right time over and over again. I think the universe has a way of rewarding people that stick their neck out.
Sure.
Especially after you stick your neck out and you get it whacked a couple of times and you still stick it out. It's like, all right,
you're dumb enough to hang around.
We'll cut up some slack here. But yeah, so we ended up getting connected with some people that were influential media figures and within our industry. Not like it was Tom Brokaw using our products, but it was the connections to the people at the juncture where they helped skyline our product on a national and in some cases international level.
Yep. And
we went from being 3 guys in a basement to being like 14 guys crammed into that same basement. I mean, and you're talking, I'm 6'4". It's an old, century-old house with like the low ceiling. We used to have to put the plastic protective things over the light bulbs, and I was still smashing light bulbs out with my head walking around down there. But we went from that to a pretty large operation in a very short span of time. So in 2010, late 2009, we were like, we've got to find a space of our own. We can't keep doing this in a basement. And I went out looking, and through a mutual friend, I got introduced to a gentleman who owns an injection molding company here on the west side of Cleveland also. And kind of an interesting story, because being from the manufacturing world, I think you can appreciate this. Their 3rd generation family owned business doing injection molding. The family kind of built the business off of the vacuum cleaner industry. And so they've made, they injection molded a lot of the hose connectors and the crevice tools and all of the pieces that come in your vacuum that you buy from like Dirt Devil or whatever. They were making those parts. And one of the interesting things about it was they had been this huge operation in a very large facility they'd kept adding on to over the decades. And then the 90s happened and China happened, right? And all of that commodity injection molding just whooshed over to Asia, practically overnight. And so here was this company that has contracted and contracted and contracted to the point where they've been selling off injection mold machines. And so they had tens of thousands of square feet of factory floor space that was now vacated, and no real prospects of, coming back on. So they were like, "Oh, we'll make you a great deal on this wing of the building." And so we moved our operation in there, and as it was growing, they were the ones that actually, because everything we were doing was made out of Kydex, right? Like when your only tools a hammer, all your problems start to look like nails. And so we were making these holsters. We were making the belt loops for the holsters out of Kydex. Everything was made out of this material. But we were having breakage issues with the belt loops because Kydex is not meant to handle that repeated flexing. And so we were talking to our landlord, and he was like, you should get into an injection molded part for these. And we had no idea what it would take to do that, but
the match made in heaven, though, right?
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting collision of 2 worlds that have completely different objectives and kind of like ground rules.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is they were used to making parts for manufacturers where it's like they were going to run 1.5 million crevice tools for a company in a year. And the company was negotiating and haggling with them 3 and 4 decimal places to the right of the decimal on what their
tiny fraction of a penny.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember sitting with them when we finally got our mold design, and we were like, "Oh my God!" I still remember like writing the check for this mold and realizing that it cost more than my parents paid for the house I grew up in.
Right.
And so I'm like, "Oh, this is crazy." But the joke about injection molding is that you take the first part that comes out of the mold, you put it in your bank vault because that one's worth $80,000, and then everyone after that's like 49 cents. But
goes down from there.
But we had in that moment a conversation with him about like, okay, what is our part price going to look like? And they were like, well, the material you selected is really expensive, and these are going to be pricey parts. And we were like, oh God, what have we done? We've just front loaded all this money, and now they're talking about that the parts are going to be really expensive. And he's like, they're going to be like 40 cents a piece. And we about fell out of the chair laughing because I was like, we did our math on what it was costing. It was costing $9 to make a pair of belt loops for a holster. And it's just but that contrast, there was a weird moment where, as a result of doing business with us and then the relationships we brought in from the firearms industry, they now do a ton of business within the firearms industry.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's such a great lesson of how we get locked into a paradigm.
Yeah.
And you just can't see beyond that. And so, they were competing in that extreme commoditized world and not realizing they had whole other constellations to go sell into.
Especially when you consider that the motivation for us to get into an injection mold wasn't to make 15 million parts a year.
Right.
It was to make 40,000 parts a year that never broke and came back for warranty replacement, And so for us, it was about freeing up labor on the plant floor to be able to do other tasks, to make the actual holsters themselves.
And improve the product.
Yeah. So like there's that. I try to remind myself of that when I'm looking at problems in general. It's very easy to fall into a prescriptive mindset of like, well, this is what I've always done, and this is what and it's like when you start having like a standard overlay for solution 101 that goes on everything, you miss so many ways to pivot. And I think that in particular, like their movement as our landlord into being a molder for a lot of the firearms industry projects, it was their understanding. They were like, oh my God, there's a customer base we never knew about that doesn't need to monopolize our entire production line for 4 months of the year.
And doesn't need to haggle over the fraction of a penny. Yeah,
they just want 10,000 perfect parts.
Yep.
And, a rounding of 15 cents on a part is irrelevant to them. Like so it changed the entire matrix of how they were looking for customers and what sorts of clients they were interested in moving forward. And also,
that's such a great lesson.
Day, that 5 million parts a year customer is not motivated in the same way to be here as the 50,000 parts per year customer.
Well, and then the other side of that is you and your peers who were coming into this industry, you're also getting this whole new world revealed to you, where you were making things very expensively and not so well, and you discover this whole industry that can do things for you if they just change their paradigm. It's just amazing. I mean, it's such a great fundamental manufacturing lesson of, geez, if you get yourself locked into something that's not working, there's probably a different answer that will work.
Yeah, and in particular, I think you and I talked about this on the phone the other day. I get really bristly when I hear people talk about how manufacturing's not coming back to America, and I want to attack those people for two reasons. One is because it certainly can. The reasons that manufacturing left America in many ways had nothing to do with the working labor pool here, or the price of labor, or the technology. It had everything to do with various subsidies and incentives that were offered. And on top of that, the fact that it's like it can't come back. But the people that say that are typically the ones that have no idea what's here already. And it's like
correct.
I drove you around and showed you just the vendors we work with. I can tell you within a 1 hour drive of Cleveland, Ohio, we could spend months and never even get to everybody.
For sure. Yep. And people have no idea what's in their own backyard.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that's, you definitely struck a nerve with me, because I've been saying that. In fact, I'm writing a book right now that is going to sing the praises of some unsung heroes of American manufacturing. I just picked, 22 of my favorites from work I did on Forbes and other discovery And you're exactly right. There are so many people out there making it work that we can learn from. And there's absolutely no reason we can't pull back a bunch of what we sent overseas, because in a lot of cases we sent it overseas with wrong measures, with wrong regulations, things that we can absolutely fix and reindustrialize.
Well, and we saw a test run of it during the pandemic.
Right.
I mean, the amount of mold making and projects we did that were not at all related to firearms, just because people had to reshore projects, and we were in the plastic space, and the wild argument that in manufacturing has gone offshore and must remain offshore because that's some sort of economic incentive for the United States. It's like, this is the least supportable argument, because I'm like, you're talking about countries that are running deficits to subsidize industries just to be able to make them function in their countries, whereas they were running profitably at American pay scale in the United States, and without a government check to do it.
I have done a series of Substack articles on this canard that rich countries deindustrialize. And everyone seems to take that as some kind of ironclad rule of economics, and it is utter nonsense. I mean, the reason we sent swaths of our industry overseas was not because we got rich, it was because we got stupid. Yeah. We instituted a bunch of regulations that went way beyond any kind of sensible protections. We had finance measures that were just utter lunacy, return on net assets, where you're basically saying productive manufacturing assets are a detriment to your business. What kind of insane stupidity do you have to ingest to be a finance guy saying something like that? And yet that ruled the roost for decades.
Well, and you let there's a lot of people that were economic theorists.
Mm-hmm.
That, they invariably are the ones that have the free time to go whisper in the ear of politicians, right? If you're actually doing something productive with your life, you don't have time to be fiddling with the gears of government. And of course, their ideas. It's that scene from Lord of the Rings where the wizard's whispering and the king. Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? Stop ruining it for everybody. I look at in particular. And I know I catch a lot of flack from a lot of my friends in the industrial design and the manufacturing spaces. One of our running jokes is that, like, I can see both sides of the coin on intellectual property. And one of the arguments when I talk about why we shouldn't offshore things is because it's one of the first things that gets flushed right down the toilet is any intellectual property protection you had. And, it's wild to me. I'll have conversations with other companies about collaborating on projects, and we've done a lot of like contract design or contract manufacturing work for other companies. But it's amazing that we have to go through all these hoops, mutual non-disclosure agreements, and all this non-compete clause. And then I'm like, but you're thinking about making this in China, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, why did we even sign any of these papers? We could have just had a beer and talked about it openly, because every protection you've established for yourself is gone the moment you actually try to make this thing. So, but on the other side, I've always been actually fairly, this is the lowercase L libertarian in me, but like, I'm actually fairly anti-intellectual property because of the fact that I'm like, having an idea does not entitle you to dictate what I can do with machines I bought, with manpower I pay for, with raw materials I purchased. Like, to me, that seems like really, and I know it really ruffles feathers with a lot of people in the manufacturing world, because they think of like that government protection as something. Yeah. And where I come at it from is that, the dilemma is that innovation, and if you think of most products you purchase aren't patent protected, that there's tons of money in it. Like, is there a patent on a coffee table? Is there a patent on a TV remote? Or like, no, but we all buy these things. They're made by shipping container full of these things, and so there's clearly no negative impact on the demand.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's something where we've gotten so dug in on like, I had a good idea and I have to protect it. And it's like you spend all this money throwing lawyers at stopping other people from doing things rather than focusing on how can I make this more efficiently? How can I do a better job marketing it and reaching my customer? How can I find new customer bases that I haven't previously found for it? And it's like, if you redirected the dollars from that legal fund that you're because let's face it, in IP wars, only the lawyers get rich. Everybody else is just getting milked from both sides. But I think what it comes down to is that the redirection of that funding to what I would consider positive activities, which are creative, innovation, things like that, we'd see a lot better return on the investment. And I don't know, Elon's kind of a lightning rod in the political world, but I do think it's kind of interesting how it's like they've secured patents, but then they've opened them to everyone. So it's like that to me is kind of cool. I do think that the longer we go, the more of that type of thing makes sense. But I think that a lot of the whole chase of intellectual property has come from, once again, the wrong people whispering in your ear. It's like there are people that it's in their best interest to get you to kind of close off and hoard things. And it's because they're like, oh, well, you build this catalog of IP and that's where the value of your company comes from. And it's like, is the value of your company the ideas you had or your ability to execute them? Because in my mind, it's your ability to find the customer, ship the product, and convert that into dollars that actually should be defining what value the company has.
It's interesting because it marches in concert with the whole move away from trades, and that battle that we're fighting now is not having the people to backfill the boomers who were the last generation to have trades and manufacturing jobs held as a positive. Is this whole concept that only thought-oriented jobs matter and that doing no longer matters. And couldn't be more wrong-headed. So I appreciate what you're saying about that end of it. Let's switch gears and talk about your consultancy. Now, so you get into this holster business right at the right time. That goes crazy. And you're not only navigating the craziness of the demand creation that governments brought you, like you talked about, but the gun industry has gone nuts as well from a demand perspective overall because of, threats to our rights and liberties. And somehow along the way, then you also decide, consulting is something I can fit into my free time.
Well, that's a funny sideline thing. We actually, the consulting side came up for a couple of tangential reasons. One was because we had companies that were wanting to work with us for either some contract design or contract manufacturing work, but they're like, we're sort of a competitor or competitor adjacent in our industry. And so they just basically needed an air-gapped entity that they could do business with so that their board of directors was okay with them engaging, right? So it was like, okay, it's a front. But the other side of it was, and I'm sure anyone watching this already can tell this, and from talking to me, but I have no shortage of opinions. And the thing was that I got really frustrated about, I'm 20 years in this industry. A lot of people, I go to a trade show and they're like, oh, hey, can I buy you a drink and ask you a question? And I'm like, you can always buy me a drink. Sign me up here, right? But and the joke I make is I got lots of opinions, just ask me. But I got frustrated because I'd sit and give people knowledge that I had earned through the hard sweat and blood and pain and suffering of doing this the hard way. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, and I'm not to say that I'm I'm the ultimate trailblazer, but there are areas where it's where we went initially, no one had gone, and how we got there. And so we, by trial and error, figured some things out.
Sure.
And so to have these people ask you your input, and then to watch them take that and just throw it over their shoulder and continue on. I was
just kind of walk away with it.
Yeah. And so I had one of my own mentors from the sales world. I was commiserating with him over a drink one night. And he was like, the reason they don't value it's because you're not assigning any value to it. He's like, you got to charge them for it. Otherwise, you're just another asshole. Your opinion means as much to them as their brother-in-law. And his brother-in-law, works at the airport, fueling planes. So like, what relevance does that have? But he's like, it's that's where you have to do it. So I was like, okay, well, let me try this. And what I did realize is over time, the biggest value that I've been able to bring to people is in two categories, manufacturing and retail. And typically it's always sales and marketing adjacent, but it's not like it's not a marketing agency thing. And it's not I'm a contract sales guy. It's more along the lines of manufacturers tend to be really good at making things, less good at selling things. And from a manufacturer's perspective, the dilemma we are into now is as the boomer age out and die off is happening, and the oldest of the Gen X world is actually starting to enter that retirement phase also. We've got a dilemma in the fact that the old model was you were a manufacturing company that sold a consumer good. You figure out how to make 10 million of them a year so that you can get your unit cost as low as possible. And then you find 2 or 3 distributors or wholesalers that will buy up 100% of your production capacity for the year. And then next year, your job is to figure out how you can get an extra 15% more capacity added, and then go find another distributor to buy up that capacity. And it was always the goal was to stay at 100% capacity buyout. And that works if it's 1968 and the economy is booming and everybody's got 3.5 children and, everybody's dad works at the steel mill making great union scale. Yeah. You don't live in that world. And the future the taper is getting more aggressive, right? So as a result, that combined with the internet has caused people to realize like, oh, maybe there's something I need to be doing with a direct to consumer approach to things. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I come in, is like helping steer people through what sales channel makes the best play for them. And also a lot of times the manufacturers have not done a good job of assessing the value of their product and or figuring out what the real value proposition is, right? So manufacturers typically design products left to their own devices. They will design a product based off of how the engineers and the machinists and the CAD guys think would be the best solution. And very often technical people design products almost as like a display of their technical prowess. And so but the features and the form factor don't necessarily reflect what's actually going to be the best selling thing. And so it's giving a little bit more of that marketing-led design and product ideation side of things to be like, I know you think you want to do this, but do this instead. It's similar, but that subtle difference will make all of the changes for what your profitability is going to look like. So we deal with what you should be making, what you should be pricing it at, and what channels to sell it through to kind of maximize, especially if you're just sticking your toe in the water with any kind of direct consumer model. And I know it is scary for a lot of companies to make that pivot from like, we just sell to these 3 wholesalers and then we don't worry about it, to being like, oh, I actually have to transact business, which means I've got to deal with customer service and shipping and all these things that are in a totally different fulfillment category that you now have to look at.
So with that being said, then focusing back on your business, what are your biggest challenges now?
What we're in the midst of, and I would say the firearms industry in general battles this, is firearms industry companies are historically undercapitalized. Traditional lenders don't like them. Our industry is, kind of like considered radioactive. The other dilemma is that a lot of the people that get into this space are exactly like me, where it was a hobby that I was interested in. It became a business. We didn't build a proper business plan going in. We didn't set the company up for the best success from the jump, which means when you do need to go look for money to grow your business, you're not structured in a way that anybody is actually like, no underwriter is going to take you seriously. So it's hard to go back and be like, oh, if only I'd known 10 years ago that I needed to have my book set up this way instead of this way and have been recording this and this. Capital is definitely access to capital, and even fluency in deal structure and deal flow. Because like what I've seen is there are tons of companies right now that are trying to engage in the firearms industry because they typically are US based manufacturers. And there's a lot of interest now all of a sudden in like, hey, we'd like to acquire US manufacturing. The dilemma is you come to a guy like myself, where I have, whether you're talking about bringing in private equity, or, oh, this is we want to acquire you and fold you into this portfolio of companies, or, oh, we want to just put some money to work and, you know, we'll invest in you, but we just want a certain percentage back every year. Nobody has, like, no one's actually doing the educational component of, like, okay, do you need to grow your business? Here are 10 ways you could do that, and here's the workshop on how to get your company ready. Typically, the only people doing that are some of the more sharkish lenders in this space, right? So you end up where it's like the only access to knowledge is from the people that are going to be the most predatory in the, you know, what you're going to pay for that money.
So it's really interesting you mentioned that, because that's something I've been delving into for about a year now. It all started with a guy not too far from you, family steel company guy who's now the kind of chairman emeritus, retired CEO, mentioned to me about the predatory nature of PE. I started digging into that and learned a lot, and had a lot of people who didn't want to speak publicly. And I'm actually working on that very thing right now, is to engage with manufacturers to help them chart that growth path and position themselves if they're looking for outside investment or they're looking for an exit. How do I get myself set up for that? And how do I find the ones that are going to do it responsibly?
Yeah,
it is a huge need. I agree.
I've heard of several horror stories, and the best way I could compare them, private equity in particular. And I'm not saying all private equity, but the stories I've heard, right?
Yep, there are plenty out there.
Yeah. The best way I would compare them, the best way I would compare them is that scene from Goodfellas where they take over the restaurant and they just start running the tab with all the suppliers, and they're taking the booze right out the back and all the linens and stuff. That's what I've seen happen with the people.
Yeah. Extraction. Yep.
You were selling your business. In fact, all you did was, like, offer up any credit you had available to be looted from the place, and they suck the marrow out of your bones and leave you on the side of the road.
That is absolutely one of the most common horror stories I've heard as well. So that's reality. And the thing is, there's that huge need for the investment, you know, because there is reshoring happening. We've got our growth, and we've got all the boomers wanting to exit. So I hear you. And so, you know, if someone's looking for a consultant on that, that's what I'm going to be doing with my relaunched company. So we should talk more about that.
I tell you, I could probably put together a virtual roundtable of people to talk to you that would be interested in having a conversation about it, because that is the common thread. Is our industry, people are like, how do I get somebody to back it? Typically, what you have to do is find some rich Texas oil guy who likes guns, who's willing to write you a check. And but, you know, that doesn't answer the other thing typically that you need. It's like, okay, if I'm trying to scale this operation, or I'm trying to really exploit an opportunity, I typically also need some expertise that I don't have natively.
Yep.
So having the dollars is cool, but, you know, typically you want some of that brain trust to come with it. And so it's like, dollars alone are not the answer. But so to your original question, one of the big hurdles, capital, and it's not just speaking on behalf of me, but on behalf of this entire industry. The other thing is that we've started during the pandemic. It began, but we had this huge boom, right? Like the 2020, 2021, 2022, the firearms industry we had the biggest boom I've ever experienced in the entire time I've been in the industry for over 20 years. So we went from basically, we came home from SHOT Show, which was the industry's big trade show in January. It's in Las Vegas. We landed, and I remember listening to the news, and they were talking about this Chinese in flu-like symptoms thing. We get home from Vegas, and it's, you know, starting to, the messaging is starting to pivot already. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, as we headed into 2020, that's where things got really challenging, because not only did everybody start panic buying, they had their stimulus checks. And then we started having the civil unrest, overlaid with that.
Right.
And, you know, it was like gun stores couldn't keep anything in stock. Like we shipped so much product, and, you know, the problem is that we've experienced booms in the past. 2008, before the Obama election, after every mass shooting, there was always a big spike, but it was, you know, you get 3-4 months and then it went back to normal.
Yep.
this was such a severe spike, but it wasn't even a spike. It was a giant arc that then plateaued and sustained for a long time. We have companies that started post 2020 that grew to be $7-8 million a year revenue companies.
Yep.
And they thought that was just what it was. They did not realize that it's like you are living in a magical fake time. This is not a real market.
Yep.
But it lasted so long that two things happened. One was we had a ton of businesses that came out of nowhere that exploded, and then the moment the sales weren't, started to fall off, they were way overextended. The other thing that we saw happen was the boom lasted long enough that people were like, well, maybe we will scale up. And so they went out, and it was while the interest rates were still low. So they went out, they got SBA, was it the 7A loans or whatever? Mm-hmm. So they go through the process, they get approved for these things. They add on to their building, or they buy a new building, or they bring in a bunch of new CNC mills or a new injection mill, whatever it was. They bought capital equipment, grew and added staff, trained them, got them on. And just as they started having this capacity come online, the demand went away. Yeah. And that was bad enough. But then on top of that, you had the fact that the interest rates started to spike. And so you had your adjustable rate loan on all your capital investments, your payment doubles at the same time that your demand cuts by 70%. And so like, what is a guy supposed to do like that? And so we're seeing
the perfect storm.
Yeah, we're seeing companies go out of business left and right. And it's, like 2025 in particular has been the bloodiest year of this industry. And I don't say that lightly. Like I've seen years where it was like, oh, that company merged with that company, or oh, that company went bankrupt. This is like every week you scroll LinkedIn and the gun industry right now, like people are just quietly switching their like open to work status on, and you're like, oh, that guy has not been out of work ever in the whole time I've known him. So anyway, to get back to the original point was the biggest hurdles for us, I think, is we started pivoting to the realities of what the market was going to be like in the post-boomer world. And that meant that it's no longer about trying to find a way to make high volume SKUs. It was about how to make more SKUs with efficiency and that speed and agility. So, and it's kind of an overplayed term, but agility at scale really is, I believe, the future of manufacturing, especially if America wants to bring manufacturing truly back. Like, let Asia keep the thing where people are fighting over, hundreds and thousands of a cent. Right. I don't want that business, and I don't think any American company should want that business. But what I do think is going to be key is, we've pivoted dramatically from, we started off thermoforming. We still do thermoforming. We got into injection molding. We still do injection molding. But our big push now is we're like native design for additive manufacturing. Going after the fact that I need to be able to adapt to the shifting market in a way that allows me to minimize my time to market with products. Designing for an additive part, I can go from an idea to a shippable part in the window of design is that. Whereas previously it was we have design, and then you have design for manufacturability for the injection molding side of things. And if you're good, you can design for that overlapped a little bit, right? You can do the product design and the design for manufacturability at the same time. And then you have to make the tool. And then you have to test the tool. And there's always a couple of tweaks to the tool, right? And then by the time you get production going, it's oh, well, you just put 16 weeks on the front end of this project before you made one single shippable part. And then you have to sell, 100,000 of them to pay for everything you've done to that point. Right. With additive, it's the barriers to entry just get ripped out of the way. Your unit cost is higher, but your risk factor is so much lower. You can correct any issues that you find over time on the fly, real time corrections to the product as you get customer feedback. That's simply not possible in these larger scale designs. Right. There will always be a place for injection molding. There will always be a place for thermoforming. But I do think that a lot of people are stuck in the mindset that, again, they're manufacturing like it's 1968 in America. It's not. It's never going to be again, at least not in any of our lifetimes.
No, and there are some bright shoots out there with people realizing that digitalization in a number of different areas bring that flexibility that we're going to need to revitalize what we do here. So it's cool to hear you talk about that. We're about out of time. Any final thoughts for the audience before we wrap up?
No, I think it won't surprise you when I just say, like, I'm going to rehammer on the fact that, like, America is still the manufacturing powerhouse. Like, we lead in innovation and productivity. And I think it should remain that way. And I will die on that hill. And going one layer deeper, I'm a huge proponent for here in the Rust Belt. I love Cleveland. I always encourage people, if anybody wants to see the industrial and other capacities of this region, I'm always happy to play tour guide and make introductions. I think that there's, we welcome everybody into this area to bring more manufacturing in, because I want this region to get back to its powerhouse days.
I agree completely. I'm up here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where, we're right there with you in the Rust Belt. And, another thing is we are starting to see a broadening even of industry across this area. So it's wonderful to see that start. And I jumped there with you on that hill to say, let's keep it rolling.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time to talk with you. It's been a lot of fun.
Same here. Thank you, Michael. And we'll have to revisit this. There's so much more to talk about. So we'll schedule another get together down the road.
Anytime.
Thanks.
Take care.
Well, hey, so what did I tell you? Was that just not the most amazing conversation? Michael's got so many incredible points. It was just a marvelous thing to talk to him and get all his insights into what's going on in American manufacturing today. So it's going to be a tough one to top, as I always say, but we're always here up for it every Tuesday to try to top our previous one. And next week's show, we're going to have a guy named Brent Sadler. So he's with the Heritage Foundation. He's an expert on Navy and shipbuilding. And this is something I've been wanting to dive into forever. Our shipbuilding is a disaster in America. That needs to be fixed. And Brent is going to be here to talk to us about why that is and what we can do to fix it. So that's going to be a good one. So tune in next Tuesday with us as well. In the meantime, this is Jim Vinosky with Manufacturing Talks signing off. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinosky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.